What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Commander video. As always, if you do appreciate these, please do subscribe to the channel. I really do want to thank you all who are here. For this video, we're going to be covering my picks for the 5 best, as well as the 5 worst Commander options from New Capenna. This will be including the main set and the Commander set of cards. Since both of them are going to be sharing a lot of mechanics, it makes sense if we're grading them on, which one is the best Commander. Now, as a bit of criteria before we go into this, total number of deck lists will matter, so the total number of decks being built. Since the Commander option has been spoiled, it will factor into the card's popularity, but more so the probability that a card is good, not necessarily that it absolutely is, in my opinion. So if a Commander option has fewer decks built, chances are it's probably not that great of a Commander, but there are some exceptions, and I will have some honorable mentions. So let's start it off here with the number 5 worst Commander option, and that is Benny Brack's Zoologist. Now, let's make one thing clear. The 5 worst Commander options from New Capenna are the 5 worst Commander options from New Capenna. That is in no way indicative of the overall quality of a Commander, but how it stacks up versus the other Commanders in the set. And New Capenna ranges from very innovative, very creative, to downright boring. And Benny Brack's, I'm afraid, while I like the card draw, is just a bit too boring. White is kind of stuck in this purgatory where you get Commanders like these that are good for card draw, but they don't really do anything else, with the exception of one really good mono-white Commander we're going to be talking about. We saw this with Mangara the Diplomat. A lot of white cards just suffer from being too boring, too simple, and while this is a great ability, I think you should throw Benny Brack's into a lot of token decks, just because it's not specific to the type of token you create, and you can get that card draw on your opponent's turns if you're able to create a token then. Convoke is nice, but I don't really think it matters too much. Benny Brack's is probably not going to be that hated of a Commander to where you're going to find yourself recasting him often. And now we move on to the number 5 best Commander option from New Capenna, and this is from the main set Jetmir Nexus of Rebels. During the time of making this video, Jetmir has the most decks built, but as I said before, that would be too easy if I just said, oh, it's the community's decision on what I personally think is a good Commander. And also, if you were to look at the data on EDHREC.com, that's where I'm getting the deck list numbers, by the way, you will find out that there are some other Commanders that are actually outpacing Jetmir. It's also worth pointing out that a lot of these New Capenna main set Commander options were spoiled a couple weeks before the Commander product ones. So there is a bit of a head start there for players who are experimenting. I think that has a lot to do with why you're going to see a higher total decks built for New Capenna main set Commanders on average. But what we have here is, pretty good for Naya. Naya, not too different from Mono White, has suffered in the past from just having boring options that only really synergize with combat, and sadly Jetmir does the same thing, although it does offer you a pretty decent win con if you're able to get to 9 creatures. And I know it's not a guaranteed win con, but if you have 9 creatures, they all get +3 power, they have double strike and trample, and vigilance. If you have that kind of dominant board presence, you should probably be in a good position to win. Jetmir also gives +3 power and all of those good keywords to itself if you have 9 creatures, so Commander damage as a win con is definitely on the table. But the reason why it's my number 5 and not any higher is because it doesn't really introduce anything new. Going wide and then going tall, that's been a fundamental thing for combat in Commander for a long time. It wasn't anything new 10 years ago, it's nothing new now. It's just more of the same in Naya, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's hard to get the creative juices flowing when you just have good keywords and more power. My pick for the number 4 worst Commander option is Denry Klin, Editor-in-Chief. I don't want to spend the whole video going over the concept of having an opinion, and I know a lot of YouTubers do that and it can be very exhausting, but let me just reiterate one more time. The worst Commanders from this set are not unplayable. The worst Commanders from this set are not even awful compared to Commanders that I would normally say are awful. They just don't really do enough, and Denry Klin is a good example of that. You have this weird choice between +1/+1 counters, first strike, or vigilance counters, and that's what your other non-token creatures are committing to when they enter the battlefield. So if you have a blue-white +1/+1 counter strategy, it could work. I'm not the biggest fan of Parry, but I think Parry's a little bit better when it comes to the counter synergies, and that Commander doesn't really do anything beyond combat. So its keywords matter. First Strike and Vigilance, they're not bad keywords, they're just not, oh my god, this is going to take my deck to the next level kind of good. I've been looking for a white Commander that could give my other creatures First Strike and Vigilance, or +1/+1 counters, and as you can see, it is one of the lowest numbers in terms of decks built. So I think the community mostly agrees, not a very inspiring Commander option. The number 4 best commander option is Giada, Font of Hope. It is possible to create a narrow linear commander option where your best choice, and really your only choice, is to go for full Angel Tribal and still make it an amazing commander option, and that's what you have here. Why is she amazing? Because she basically breaks the mold for Angels. I think for a long time, the floor for the average Angel deck was about 4 mana. So your average Angel was going to cost you at least 4, but more likely 5, 6, 7 mana. They're good creatures, but if you're playing a tribal deck, it does make it really slow and hard to get your deck going. Giada is what I was talking about with Benny Brax, where white commanders are either good keywords and maybe a good ability, or their card advantage, mana ramp, something like that. Very rarely do you see them do both, where they have a good ability and they're able to provide you with ramp or card draw. So she's a mana dork, but you can only use that mana on Angels, which is a nice little caveat there. Kinda keeps her from being in the 99 of a lot of decks, but giving +1/+1 counters to your other Angels, depending on the total number of Angels you have, is insane. And that on a 2 mana commander. Again, Angels are typically expensive. A cheap Angel commander with good keywords that will also ramp you into your other Angels will no doubt take that tribe to the next level. Next, the number 3 worst commander option is Oscar, Rubbish Reclaimer. We're starting to notice a lot of these blue-black commanders that almost seem like they would be really good control commanders. You know, commanders that offer you some kind of way of recovering your cards, maybe gaining card advantage, but it's sort of the illusion of a good control commander. He does have this cool cost reduction for each different mana value in your graveyard, but when you realize you're just playing cards you're discarding and you're not getting any kind of madness cost reduction, so all you're really benefiting off of here is maybe you're not totally losing out whenever you discard for a cost, which if that's what you're looking for, I think madness is significantly better. We have a madness commander in Anji Falconwrath. That's an example of a discard commander that actually gives you some kind of incentive to play the cards you're discarding. You want to get the cheaper cost. If it's just, hey, you get to play the card you're discarding, normal costs, everything applies, it doesn't seem as convenient. So I don't think Oscar's that great of a commander. Only 89 decks. There's just not enough here. I could see if maybe there was a way that Oscar would allow you to discard cards in order for that trigger to go off, maybe enable himself. The number 3 best commander option, and my personal favorite from the set, Tivit, Seller of Secrets. Now, why I now think Tivit is only really the 3rd best is because of the limitations for Council's Dilemma. We only have so many of them, and when I made my top 10 for New Capenna Commander, I didn't at the time realize that there were only maybe like 6 good voting cards, and that they're all pretty much Council's Dilemma. It does kind of hold the deck back a bit if you want to build it. I still think fundamentally what the commander is fantastic. You have Flying and Ward, which is a pseudo protection, but you have the potential to get card draw through clue tokens and mana through treasure tokens through voting. You get the trigger whenever he enters or whenever you attack with him, and while voting you may vote in additional times, so you're pretty much guaranteed to get at least 1 or 2 of whatever you really want, even if everyone else votes against you. That is good for commander. I like card draw, mana, I love treasure tokens, you have good keywords, you have ward, it ticks a lot of boxes, but the cherry on top was no doubt the ability to vote in additional time. Now the number 2 worst commander option, and this is to no one's surprise, one of the most disappointing cards in the entire main set, Urabrask Heretic Praetor. Now I did say I was going to be a little bit more lenient when it came to the main set of New Capenna, and that not every legendary creature is intended to be a commander option, but let's face it, if it's a mythic rare, if it's a Praetor, Wizards knows people have been playing with Praetors and Commander for a long time, using them as commander options. The older Urabrask is at least 10 times better than this one, and even he wasn't that great a commander, not very versatile, just slowing down your opponent, speeding up your creatures. This Urabrask, I will say something that works in its favor is that you are able to play cards from exile, which will benefit a way better commander like Prosper Tomebound, but nothing else. If you want to play Urabrask as a commander, you basically have a worse Ubamask. Urabrask, Ubamask. Urabrask, Ubamask. Hey Wizards, I see what you did there. Main reason why I think it's one of the worst commander options is because it doesn't do what you want a Praetor to do. You want to handicap your opponents while giving yourself a one-sided advantage. And while you are able to exile a top card and play it until end of turn, in addition to your draw step, your opponents are still able to play the cards they draw. In most cases, they won't even care. And if they're playing a Prosper Tomebound deck, they'll probably thank you. And unlike in Prosper, you don't really have as many payoffs for playing from exile. So just not a very good one, I would stay away from it. The number 2 best commander option from New Capenna is the Beamtown Bullies. This card has influenced the market like no other. I'm dead serious, I don't think there's a single commander option from these 2 sets, the New Capenna main set and the commander product, that has actually brought up the price of weird cards like this one. I think if we had more Council's Dilemma cards, Tivit would drive up the price of those, because currently I don't think it's quite as strong a strategy. But with the Beamtown Bullies, you just have so many bad creatures with really awful ETBs from really old sets that are suddenly useful in Commander because you have a very fun and easy way to torment your opponents. Find a way to dump those creatures into your graveyard, and then you're able to gift them to one of your opponents. Since the Beamtown Bullies has haste, it makes it very efficient. Great keywords. That's what I value in Commander. It's not going to have as many decks built compared to maybe some other ones, but when you introduce something new and you do it in a way that is very appealing with haste, it's in that sweet spot of only 4 mana for a commander, more people are going to notice it, and because people have noticed it, you've seen it have that market impact. Now, the number 1 worst commander option from New Capenna is Fabine, Boss's Confidant. So 6 mana for this Naya Cat Advisor. I don't know what it is with Naya, but you get some of the most lackluster creature token strategies. Creature tokens you control have haste on a 6 mana commander. That's very hasty. You might want to hold back on getting to your haste. By the time you get to that 6 mana and you start building up your board, someone's going to Wrath of God you, and it's going to be really funny. We get the return of Parlay, which is similar to Council's Dilemma, and that those are both abilities from Conspiracy. Hopefully it means we get continued support, but as is, this commander option doesn't really give you anything of what you want. Parlay is more of a group hug ability, in that you're offering card draw for all of your opponents. There's some kind of payoff for you, of course, which is 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens for each land. For each non-land, your creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. Yes, she's able to make your tokens for you, but that's like the one good thing about her. You might think that's a big deal getting +1/+1. If we're just averaging it out, well, you maybe get 2, 3 3s that can attack with haste, all on a 6 mana commander that you're gonna have to pay 8 mana to get out the second time, and then 10 mana, and then late game that's not even gonna be viable. We have the support for creature token strategies, it's just this is significantly worse than something like Garrod, where you can actually take advantage of specific creature tokens through Populate, and even that commander is a little forgotten. If it's just a strategy around creature tokens and Parlay doesn't quite give you the card advantage you're looking for because it helps everyone else out, just a weird commander option. I know what they were going for here, trying to make the ultimate Parlay commander, but Parlay was never really something people were itching for. Like, oh god, we gotta return to Parlay. Remember Selvala? Now, before I go to the number 1 best commander option, let's talk about a couple honorable mentions. The first one is a dishonorable mention for worst commander, Errant Street Artist, and that is solely off of the number of decks built. This is where I have to disagree with a lot of people who maybe ignored Errant. This has the fewest decks built, and this is, in my opinion, better than all the ones I talked about being worse. Flash, Defender, Haste, and you'd pay 2 mana and tap her to copy target spell you control that wasn't cast. You may choose new targets for the copy, so you copy copies on a 1 mana Flash commander with Haste. That is pretty cool. It is a unique strategy where you're introducing copies, and you can only really copy the copy. We have so many blue spells, so many blue commanders that focus on copying normal spells that you cast. Take advantage of the copies by getting more copies. I mean, just look at a few deck lists and you'll be seeing something you haven't seen before. And the honorable mention for best commander is Zayatora the Incinerator. This does fall into the same category with Jetmir, I would say. If Jetmir is more of the same for Naya, this is more of the same for Jund. You're sacrificing creatures for some kind of payoff, and the payoff here is that you're able to deal damage, and you're able to create 3 treasure tokens. That's really good. It may already be a top 3 all-time Jund commander. I just don't think we were quite as desperate for another Jund dragon that dealt with sacrificing. So my pick for the number 1 best commander option is Anhelo the Painter. I wasn't too certain on how this would work. Like everyone else, I look at something and initially, I might say yay or nay, and I think I was leaning closer to nay when I first saw Anhelo. Then I started to see the benefit to sacrificing creature tokens that you get off of something like Talrand, and the strength of just being able to copy any instant or sorcery once a turn. You get this on a very cheap commander option, only 3 mana. If there's any downside is that you are going to have to focus on creature production and balance that with your total number of instants and sorceries. It's very difficult to do that. It may seem awkward to build because most Spellslinger decks, they want to keep their instants and sorcery count high while trying to minimize the number of creatures, because if you have too many creatures, they might have instant and sorcery cast triggers, but you won't have as many instants and sorceries. We get the reintroduction to Spellslinger in Grixis. However, it is in a way that is potentially more unique if you want to go down a different path. If you want to focus on Reanimator, I think this has scary potential. If you think about sacrificing creatures and getting copies of Reanimate so you can bring back more creatures, at that point the only thing you'd have to worry about is losing too much life. You could of course focus on Aristocrats, any strategy where a creature, if it dies, it has a good death trigger. Only real caveat is of course you need to balance instants and sorceries with creatures, otherwise this commander's not going to work as well. That aside, I think you have a very strong commander option. Because it is in that sweet spot of only 3 mana, it means you have more room to breathe for the rest of your deck. So anyway, that's going to do it for the video, the top 5 best and worst commander options from New Capenna. Again, if you appreciate the videos, please do subscribe. Commander Void here, I will see you again next time.